Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's Rosh Muhammad Salih here, the editor of 5 Pillars, and I'm here at the Al-Mahdi Institute in Birmingham, which is a Shia seminary. And the reason why I'm here is because Yasser al-Habib now claims to speak for Shia Islam. And there also has been some anti-Shia sectarianism during demonstrations outside cinemas while people have been protesting against this blasphemous Lady of Heaven movie. Now, there's going to be a declaration of unity signed today here by a small group of Sunni and Shia imams, and they hope that this might dampen sectarian tensions between the two sects. But to be honest, I'm also here because as a Sunni Muslim myself, I'm also curious, and many others are too, do all Shias believe in the narrative as presented by the film, and especially the invective against our mother Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, and the first two caliphs of Islam, Abu Bakr and Umar, may Allah be pleased with them?
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Joint statement by Sunni and Shia scholars concerning the Lady of Heaven movie. The recently released film, The Lady of Heaven, has incited sectarian tension amongst Muslims for its offensive depiction of early Muslim history. We strongly and without reservation condemn its writer Yasser al-Habib for this contemptible action, which has led to escalating sectarian tensions at a time when Muslim unity is most needed. We equally condemn the takfiri backlash we have seen in recent days. As leading figures engaged in reconciling relations amongst Muslims, we would like to inform the public that the contents of this film severely lack academic rigor and conflicts with credible early historical accounts. We have meticulously discussed many historical contentious issues raised in this film in the past through scholarly engagements on relevant platforms, and can reassure the public that the narrative presented neither represents a scholarly account of early Muslim history, nor does it take into consideration the divergent historical narratives and nuances. The ambition to present such a biased narrative can only be a result of fringe groups with the motive of creating disharmony and dissent amongst Muslims, as is obvious. We advise all Muslims, in line with the opinions of notable past and contemporary scholars amongst Sunnis and Shias, not to support the malevolent endeavors of a few radicals, whether they are Yasser al-Habib and his fellow producers of this film, either those who label all Shias as kafir, or those who seek to malign the Prophet's family, wives, and companions. Accordingly, all factually inconsistent viewpoints that lead to strife contravene the teachings of the noble Quran and the beloved Prophet need to be unreservedly rejected and denounced. We urge all the Muslims to be calm and cooperate with each other in dealing with such tribulations. Yes. Finally, as leading figures in the British Muslim community, we take this opportunity to remind the public of our collective commitment to thoroughly discuss issues of difference amongst Muslims in a scholarly manner on relevant platforms.
Yes.
In this respect, we encourage all Muslim denominations to participate and responsibly study their differences. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Thank you. The Muslims need to stand as one body. They cannot be divided. In fact, when we study early history from the Shia perspective, even those who believe in the popular narrative will say that Imam Ali did not want to claim his right for the sake of maintaining the unity of the Ummah. So the people who claim to follow the conduct of the Prophet, Imam Ali, and see Lady Fatima as that figure bringing about peace have done the very contrary by releasing such a movie. They should be upholding this message. Additionally, as Muslims, our actions have to be mature actions, full of wisdom. Can anybody say incitement of hatred, creation of sectarian tension are wise actions? So this in itself is indicative that people who claim themselves to be Muslims are not sympathetic to Islam. The motivation cannot be the message of God, His blessed messenger, the Imam, the Sahaba, or Lady Fatima. Having said this, we have to also acknowledge that there is a problem. Muslim unity cannot be arrived at until there is a mature attitude prevalent amongst the Muslims of engagement at a scholarly and a mature level, to look into their differences and resolve them, or agree to live by the differences in a way that is not offensive. Now in this country, we have right of expression, freedom of speech, and we wouldn't want to curtail that. But as Muslims, we are committed to Islam. So there is a conflict clearly between freedom of speech and commitment to Islam. And that conflict finds a middle ground, a resolution, that have the right to express yourself, but in a measured manner, through wisdom and responsibility. The narrative of the movie is claimed to be a popular Shia narrative, and that it is also recorded within Sunni books. Now I'd like to point out that the narrative that is claimed to be a popular narrative today was not a popular narrative historically. Also would like to point out that this particular version that the movie is giving is not the only version. Why not be true to the text and show other narratives that were prevalent before this day? Also to point out that the very first text that details the attack on the door of Lady Fatima has been discredited by the highest leading Shia authority, Sayyid Ali Hussein Sistani, where he says the book Sulaim bin Qais cannot be relied upon. And the past grand Shia scholars, I believe it was SADUQ, who stated that you cannot rely upon this book. It also has to be stated that this is not a singular narrative. There are many narratives. This has just recently become popular. It cannot be justified by saying that the Sunnis also have this particular version, because Sunnis have many other versions just as the Shias have. Be true, be honest, have integrity. Discuss it in a manner that is responsible for the sake of Allah. There are so many anomalies in this particular narrative that we don't even have to cross-reference it with other texts. It fails the test of rational scrutiny. I'm going to take another example here to just show how feeble the grounds are of the narrative here. It shows that Bibi Aisha and Bibi Hafsa poisoned the Prophet on the instructions of Khalifa Abu Bakr and Khalifa Umar. Now, you find in the Quran that at minor nuisances that the wives of the Prophet were causing to the Prophet, there is a whole chapter revealed, reprimanding the wives of the Prophet and cautioning them. When they were harassing them on emotional issues, if the Quran can respond that sternly, we are actually saying that they conspired to poison him and then poisoned him and the Quran remains silent? Any thinking person would discount such narratives. Now, the first thing we need to note here is that majority of the Shias don't know these things. Movies like these will now possibly make this into the popular narrative of the Shia, whereas it never was a popular narrative of the Shia.
The objectives and what we've seen so far is the agenda is to present a certain narrative which strives towards dividing our community, which unfortunately during this period we are very divided. The movie has been introduced to inflame, should we say, Muslim sectarianism. And one of the things that we are all aware of is the danger of violence, extremism, especially sectarianism. We've seen it in Iraq, how it was used and how unfortunately a beautiful country was turned into a sectarian war. It's been used in Pakistan, and we've seen the killing from both sides. Sunnis and Shias have been killed for something which doesn't represent our religion. The objective of today is that we come together and we make a statement that we as Muslims, not just as Sunnis and Shias, but Muslims, we reject the context of this movie, the objective of this movie, and we reject the people that are attempting to divide us. One of the greatest tribulations that we face in the modern society is the lack of information and the lack of interaction between different communities. And one of the objectives that we have is that we want to bring Muslims from all different facets of society and different denominations to sit with each other and have dialogue. The objective and the agenda behind this movie is a person who I will not dignify by mentioning his name, but he's a person who is a hate preacher, who has been rejected wholeheartedly by the most senior authorities within Shia Islam, from Najaf to Qum to Iran. Scholars across the board have condemned his rhetoric and his attempt to divide the Muslim community. And I call on the British government and I call upon authorities to look into his agenda and to look into his activities, because he is a foreigner, he isn't from the United Kingdom, and he's someone that has come to this country, and what he's doing is trying to or attempt to divide our community, to divide the Muslims. And we don't need this. We don't need hate preaching. What we need is Muslims to come together, sit together and have a type of dialogue with each other. We are more than willing to sit with him if he had any right intention to sit with us and talk to us and share his views, and we would have responded. But by making a movie which gives a total distortion to historical accounts of what happened, and the agenda regarding it is very, very, very serious. I would call it intellectual dishonesty. So that portrayal of saying that Umar and the early Muslims, the Sunnis today, all Sunnis around the world somehow are extreme and are violent is something that we condemn. This concept of takfir, and we've seen a reaction. Sadly, over a year ago, we saw sectarian tension in Pakistan, where certain preachers said something that resulted in major, massive anti-Shia rhetoric on the rise in Pakistan. As we condemn this movie, we equally condemn the takfir, should we say, of calling any person a non-Muslim. No one has the right to take anyone out of the fold of Islam. We condemn all forms of violence. No one has the right to take the law into their hands. And we would urge all Muslims to be calm, collective, and not to judge the actions of one individual and assume that this is the narrative from our Shia brothers.
There are statements from our grand scholars known as the Maraji in Shia faith today, and the way in which they have spoken unreservedly either about Muslim unity or in condemnation specifically about the film The Lady of Heaven. I want to mention just 3 statements from them to give you a glimpse of how Shia scholars speak about this matter. The first is His Eminence Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the Wali al-Faqih, or the leader of Iran. On the 21st of October 2021, so less than a year ago, he gave a statement about the importance of Muslim unity. And in it he said, the first duty of all Muslims today is to understand the inclusivity that Islam has to all of us. The second duty of all Muslims is to understand Muslim unity, and that this is not a political cause, this is essential to Islam itself. And then he began to narrate a number of great scholars in the Islamic world that have been the champions, the bastions of Muslim unity. For example, Shaykh Ramadan al-Bouti, the great martyr. For example, Shaykh Ahmed al-Zain in Lebanon, and Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Hakim as well. A second statement, which is mentioned by Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Fadlullah from Lebanon, he said the following: كل من يثير الفتنة بين المسلمين فهو خائن لله ولرسوله. Whoever sows fitna, sedition between the Muslims, they have betrayed Allah and they have betrayed His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. And the third is Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Taqi al-Mudarrisi from the holy city of Karbala in Iraq, under whose auspices I am a student of. A few years back, this same hate preacher, when he started to become notorious and came to the United Kingdom, we asked him his opinion of this specific preacher and the methodology that he was using to be able to bring about historical discussions. Ayatollah al-Mudarrisi responded with the following. He said, look at the works of Imam Muhammad Hussain al-Shirazi. He has written 1,400 books. Look at my works, in which we have written more than 400 books. Not once will you find any single word of abuse against either the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa or against the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa. This statement is particularly important for those who may not know. This particular hate preacher, he hails from a particular school of thought, and Ayatollah Mudarrisi was mentioning that school of thought, particularly Imam Muhammad Hussain al-Shirazi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. And so he said, look back at this great man's works, 1,400 books, not a single word you will find of abuse. This should be sufficient for us to understand our responsibilities to each other, but also how the Shia scholars have dealt with this particular matter till today.
I think what this film has done, I hope it has given our Shia friends and Sunni friends to actually work together to show that we are united against anything that threatens the unity of the Muslims. Because, when one person is hurt, then we should all be hurt. When one person is killed, the Quran says humanity has been killed. That is how great status every human life has, the sanctity and sacredness it carries. And a person who has a intention of sowing the seeds of hatred, and that is what this film is about, really. Were it a critical, academic documentary, to share the differences in a critical manner, I don't think we would be sitting here and condemning it. The condemnation comes from the evil intention behind it, the motive, which is really to hurt people and to incite people to hatred and to conflict, really.
So there you have it, brothers and sisters. You heard the speeches. I also had some off-the-record conversations today, and what I can discern, what I learnt, is that probably the majority of Shias do believe in the narrative as was projected in the blasphemous Yasser al-Habib film Lady of Heaven. However, there is also a lot of nuance in Shia belief, and not all of them believe that. And as one of the speakers said, the Shia narrative which has become popular today probably isn't a historical narrative, even according to the earliest Shia sources. What else did I learn? Well, the people here were obviously very well intentioned. They want to reduce tension. They want both Shias and Sunnis to live in communal harmony, and the wider society too. But the question in my mind is, how representative are they of the wider community? Can they bring the rank and file of both sides along with them? I think at the moment there's no doubt that the overwhelming prevailing sentiment is one of heightened sectarian tension.